Welcome to the 67th episode of the Underdog Sports NBA show. I am Tyler Laurie, and I'm joined as always by my co-host out in Los Angeles, Zandrick Ellison. Zan, how are you today?
Good. It's been about 10 games of the season. Do you feel like it's set in? Like, do you have your sea legs? Are you caught up? Are you in basketball condition right now?
I'm definitely not in basketball condition, but I need to get in basketball condition because we had the first general manager not giving a vote of confidence to his head coach with David Fizdale. So 10 games into the season, we can go on Bovada Sportsbook and we can check and see what David Fizdale's odds are for being the first coach fired, because it sounds like that might happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, the Knicks are in midseason form. What a joke. I mean, honestly, it feels like we were talking about this before. Like, I don't understand like the media, the obsession with the Knicks. I get it. Like, it's fun to watch the train wreck, but like, how can you expect much different? I know you were high on the Knicks, but when we talk about being high on the Knicks, talking about like what, 35 wins? What was like your rosy expectation?
Yeah, I think I thought if everything went perfect, they could like potentially challenge for the 8th spot. But yeah, I was expecting like between 32 and like 37 wins, just like mediocre, just below average, right?
That was on the high end of expectations. You and Steve Mills were like alone on that island plotting their plan and planning your playoff trips. But I think I was like everyone else where I thought, I think their over under was 28 or 29 or 30, and that felt about right. I mean, they had a lot of professional basketball players. There just didn't happen to be ones that had ever really won before. So I don't know why you'd think that getting a bunch of non-winning players together somehow tips the scales into a winner.
Yeah, we talked about this. It's like their expected win-loss is 2-9. They haven't been lucky or unlucky. They're arguably the worst team in the NBA, and there are some other teams that have underachieved. I think Orlando is right there with them in terms of underachievement. The Spurs as well in terms of what their typical expectations are. But, with Orlando, that team, I think we have seen them be successful before, so I'm not 100% sure what's wrong. They're a terrible shooting team. They're shooting like 28% from three, but like the Knicks, like this is a team where they were like, oh, we got a bunch of like marginally good players and we have some good young prospects, but I don't know how they ever thought this was going to fit together. And I don't know how I ever convinced myself that there was a chance that this would fit together, right?
And you weren't even high on RJ Barrett. Like, and he's been, I guess, what we expected. He's averaging 16, 6, and 4, which is solid. It's shooting sparkling 45% from the line, but still he's getting to the line.
I think his true shooting percentage is like 46.
Yeah, well, it hurts when you can't shoot free. If you get into the line, which is great, but just like shooting like Lonzo Ball while you're there, that's a problem. It's 46% right now.
But like one of the problems with the Knicks, and again, this is what we talked about with like kind of roster construction, and I love to say stuff like this, but you could tell right away they have like 4 dudes on the team whose best position is center and 2 guys who can really only play center. And then they have all score first point guards, except for like Frank Ntilikina, who they love to like kind of build up, but he's just not a very good NBA player at this point. So like, where were they ever going to be successful? Like RJ Barrett, he's never playing with good shooters. It's just never happening. It's like hopefully you're on the floor with Wayne Ellington enough that like maybe one time you come off a pick and roll and like you have space to go to the rim. But this roster just doesn't have that. I don't know if they expected like Marcus Morris and Bobby Portis to be like stretch bigs, but that's not.
And Morris has done that this year. He's at 42% from 3, but historically 36%, like an average, above average shooter. I think that like sums up the next season. Like Morris is scoring. He's actually leading the team with 18.5 points a game. But like if Marcus Morris, 30-year-old Marcus Morris is your best player, like you're like, why did you think you were going to make the playoffs? Like,
Let's riff on the Knicks for a second. Let's say David Fizdale gets fired, and we did talk about this a little bit.
Like, do you think he should get fired? Because I mean, like we say, the expectations, they're below. Even conservatively, 25, 30 wins, like they're gonna possibly be below that.
So they lost to Chicago last night, right? And Chicago has also, in my opinion, like similarly underperformed. And again, Jim Boylan, like that team is constructed better, but it's very clear that something's missing so far in this season. But I thought it was hilarious that their fans were chanting "Fire Dolan" at the game. They do understand that he owns the team, correct? Like he cannot be fired. He's the one man that cannot be fired in the Knicks organization. You think they get that?
No, he's such an easy scapegoat because he's kind of a clown.
He's kind of a clown,
right? And he's in the band and he looks weird. He has a bad hair dye, it looks like to me. he's kind of a goofball, but I don't think he's the main problem with the Knicks. I know you tend to think organizations like stink from the top down, but I don't know. I've mentioned this anecdote before, but I think it's true. Chris Mannix, who I like, I think he's a good analyst. He was on this one podcast. I heard him. He was complaining about James Dolan, as everyone is prone to do, and talking about, oh, Dolan lets the inmates run the asylum. What a terrible job as an owner. You can't do that. At the time, it was Phil Jackson. And then literally the same podcast, 15, 20 minutes later, he talks about Peter Holt of the Spurs and how great of an owner he is. And why? Because he lets the basketball people do basketball decisions. It's like the exact same thing, except they just happen to trust the wrong basketball people, I guess. But at the time, Phil Jackson was hired. Did anyone have a better resume as like a basketball coach in mind than Phil Jackson?
Well, I think there were definitely some, not to like rewrite history here, but I think there were definitely some concerns in terms of Phil Jackson's ability to evaluate talent, especially like when, not for nothing, but like the guy had Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal and Scottie Pippen and Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, I understand that. And it's a different job, but like, why could we be optimistic about Steve Kerr as a coach and not be optimistic about Phil Jackson as an executive? To me, it seems like a natural transition. It's just that he clearly was past his prime. It didn't evolve, and we get all of that now.
Right. He wasn't right for the job at that particular time, and that happens. I think that happens. I mean, the Spurs got over. Look, let's be totally realistic about the Spurs here. Like, as great as Greg Popovich is, and as great as R.C. Buford is, Greg Popovich organized his own coup and took over coaching the team at a perfect time. They end up with Tim Duncan along with David Robinson because they tanked the year before after an injury. They win the title and they really never look back. This may be the first season that they missed the playoffs under Greg Popovich, but like there's a lot of luck involved in what happened in San Antonio as well. They essentially lucked into a top 15 player of all time, and the Knicks haven't had that type of guy on their team since James Dolan has run the organization.
No, but at the same time, like, okay, so the Phil Jackson thing, that was a whiff. He hired an old guy past his prime. The current sort of exec, Steve Mills, Scott Perry is his name. They have a pretty reasonable resume. Perry, right? He's not considered like a joke candidate. He seems like he's like a professional executive.
And I would say too, real quick before you get into this, I want to know if you're saying that like this roster stinks, right? And it should not be on David Fizdale to like fix this particular roster, but like when they missed on all their free agents because like the Knicks are a joke, like what were these guys supposed to do, I guess? Are you just supposed to roll over your cap space?
Well, yeah, you should. And I think that's maybe where you could blame the organization and Mills and Dolan. If they gave the order, hey, we struck out, keep swinging, like it's time. They should have licked their wounds and pushed it back. I think that's fair and just built around RJ Barrett. That was their mistake, I think. Like sort of like creating this false, like watching Steve Mills' press conference, it seems like he thinks the team's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't understand. This is like a Bruce Allen situation with the Redskins where you're like, you know what? The culture is good. And it's like, guy, you're just getting blown out. Like you're a joke. Like the Knicks, for example, you're exactly right in that sense. Like they could have taken on bad money. Instead of signing guys to bad money, you can trade for bad contracts and get picks with them. And you can say like, look, this is going to be a little bit tough. Instead, they were like, hey, we might want to compete for the 8th or the 7th spot. And then, in a year or two, like maybe one of these guys works for us. And if not, all this money comes off the books. And that is true. They're not in a terrible spot long term now. They've dug themselves out of that.
A lot of short-term money. I think Randall's the longest.
Let me ask you a question. I got a trivia question for you. Since Jeff Van Gundy was done as the head coach of the Knicks in 2001, how many full-time head coaches have they had? So that's 18 years. How many full-time?
18 years? Okay. Full-time, so an interim coach would count.
No interim coach. I'll give you the number with interim coaches afterwards because obviously guys have been fired. But how many?
I don't. I am not a Knicks like that. Let me think. So it's 18 years. Let's say a bad organization would have a new coach every 3 years, so maybe 6 coaches.
Yeah, 9. One every 2 years. Plus, they've had multiple interim coaches for more than 25 games. So this is Sam Vecini of The Athletic came out with this today, but 11 coaches have coached more than 25 games for the Knicks since 2001. I mean, that's like,
and who's been the best? Mike Woodson?
I mean, and Mike Woodson lucked into being the best because, I mean, Mike D'Antoni would have been all right if Melo would have played the 4. But Woodson got very lucky that they had no other options. And due to injuries, Melo had to play the 4. And that was the year they won like 55 games or 58 games or whatever. And that was the only, and they got blown out by the Pacers. But like, this has been a very clear failing of the organization. And Fizdale, like, look, they're 30th in offense, like they're 26th in defense. It's very clear that like Fizdale is super part of the problem with this team, but it's not his fault that this team doesn't work together. You can't just give a guy like, it's like saying, I just give you 10 square pegs and then I give you a board with 10 round holes and I'm like, make it work. That's my fault, right? Like it's not David Fizdale's fault.
No, and so that's what I mentioned before. What's the solution? Would you fire Fizdale? Would you scapegoat Fizdale? Because as you mentioned, the fire Dolan chant is nonsensical. So say if you were hired by Dolan as his consigliere, and you say, what can I do to help this team? Where does it start? How deep? Of a rebuild do you need in the front office? Would you fire Mills? Would you fire Perry, and then fire Fizdale, or would you just stop at Fizdale?
All right, so good questions. Very good questions. And I think with the Knicks, like you said, you don't want to pile on the Knicks here because, they're a ratings grab. But, like, realistically, like, it's not a fun basketball team to watch. It's not a fun basketball team to talk about. They haven't been relevant in years. I think they have the worst winning percentage of the last 20 years. Shout out to our guy, Kendall Baker at Axios Sports. But I don't know. Here's my only issue with these types of comments. I don't know what ownership has mandated Mills and Perry to do. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people just blame Dolan, but like I don't know that it's his problem. I would probably keep Fizdale because this season specifically is kind of like a lost year, and I would want it's crazy to say that 11 games in, but I would want some level of continuity with my young guys. Like I'd want RJ Barrett and Frankie Smokes and even Dennis Smith, Kevin Knox, Mitchell Robinson. Like I want those guys to play. Like, I don't care about the rest of the veterans on this team. Like, they're getting paid a lot of money. Like, in my opinion, like, I'm trying to find assets and picks to deal Wayne Ellington for, to deal Taj Gibson, to deal, Marcus Morris would be a very, very popular guy on the trade market right now, considering how he's already played this year.
I agree with you that firing Fizdale now doesn't do much for you. It's sort of like a lost season already.
Right. You're just admitting that you have a sunk cost in terms of paying him. And he even said that in his press conference. Like, he gets paid for the next 4 years anyway. So, first of all, like, why does he have that long of a contract?
I thought he said 2.5.
2.5. It is 2.5 years. He had a 4-year deal.
Yeah. So I think they're really set up. If you look at their cap sheet, Randall for 3 years, Portis actually has a team option for next year, so maybe he won't be around. But Taj Gibson's 2 years, Wayne Ellington 2 years, which is a trade chip. Peyton's 2 years. Everything's set up for 2 years.
Right.
So I think in their mind, they're like, let's give Fizdale 2 years, and then he'll be a lame duck coach, and then you can kind of start fresh if you need to.
Right, because some of it is that Fizdale took this job. Right. Again, you take jobs. We talk about this all the time. Like, who would want jobs? And obviously, people want to take jobs. Like, if they fired David Fizdale tonight and asked Mark Jackson to take the job tomorrow, he would take it, even though this situation is currently toxic for coaches.
Yeah, well, and also when you talk about the roster, like nothing's going to really change by next year. And then you look at like the 2 years after that, we're talking 2021 summer, you have $70 million in cap room. And then that's like sort of your time where you can like get optimistic about, bringing in a new coach, bringing in a new player, or just extending the rebuild if you need to. But I don't think that's like that appealing to them.
You know what's so crazy about this? And this is why I would wonder, like, is David Fizdale doing this or is management doing this? And if Fizdale is just blatantly not paying attention to management, then I understand firing him. Like, I get it. But like, Mitchell Robinson's playing 17 and a half minutes a game. That's too low, right? Alonzo Trier, 15 minutes a game. I don't particularly like Alonzo Trier, but he's a young guy on a cheap contract. You should probably see if he's really good. Dennis Smith, 10 minutes a game. Now, I know he's been hurt. Iggy Brzakis, he's not up. He's played 3.5 minutes a game. He's only appeared in 4 games. Like, why are your young guys, like Frankie Smokes, there you go, 25 minutes a game, but it's taken a little while. Like, why is Elfrid Payton playing 25 minutes a game? Why is Mark, like, other than Julius Randle?
Well, that's like the sort of like, that's why you need to be on the same page in terms of communication with Fizdale being like, look, if you do go with young guys and you do lose a lot of games, you're going to keep your job. Don't worry about it.
And that's one of the reasons why Philly has been successful with Brett Brown, is that, like, they knew that was the plan, and they're just trying to figure out, like, all right, when we're ready to flip the switch, who is going to be a part of it? Now, as we've seen, not a lot of guys. But also, like, the Knicks, now that the new tanking rules are what they are, they end up with the 3rd pick this year. You don't get Zion, you get RJ Barrett instead. Maybe that turns out to be very good. But all your guys that are 25 and younger that you're paying money to, those need to be the guys getting the bulk of your minutes. And I understand them saying like, hey, we don't want to tank just yet because we do also want to show the value of Marcus Morris, Bobby Portis, Wayne Ellington, Gibson, those guys, because you do want to be able to trade them for somebody. But I just don't like, this feels like a pivot already for them, which I think is a big problem.
Well, and we're talking about like, why talk about the Knicks? That, you know, they're 2-9. Maybe we expected them to be 4-9, whatever. It's not the end of the world. They kind of did it to themselves by having that stupid press conference. It's almost like
it's so stupid.
It's
so
like
dumb.
The kid who's not getting attention at home, like burns down the cantina or something, like looking for negative attention. Like, why even draw attention to yourself?
But it's like of all the stats that like you would, and again, just advanced stats, they're, like I said, they're 29th in points per game. They're 15th in opponents' points per game, but they don't play particularly fast. They're 26th in pace. They're 23rd in D rating. They're 30th in O rating. They're 30th in simple rating system. They're 30th in expected win loss.
The 30th in offense is embarrassing.
They're just terrible. The team is terrible. This is a perfect example of why you put a lot of good players on the team and a lot of big personalities, and you're not just like, oh man, this is going to work, because again, their preseason over under on Bovada, I think, was like 26.5, right? So it's not like people thought they were going to be really good. I thought they would substantially outperform that. I will totally admit that. And
they might like turn it around to win 25, 30 games, but then what's the point? But my question for you is this, like the Knicks, we always hear it, you know, it takes a specific personality to thrive in New York. I don't know how true that is. I don't know if Jeff Van Gundy seems like a swinging, you know, Wall Street kind of guy compared to like Derek Fisher, I guess was like a cool media guy, bombed out. Fizdale's maybe similarly, media loves him, players like him, bombed out possibly.
D'Antoni, good media guy, like people like him, didn't he lasted 4 years though, I think.
Like if you had to put any like basketball czar or coach in charge of this team, like whom do you think would succeed? And you then forget the roster, because the roster is kind of like a blank slate almost.
I mean, if Mills is if Steve Mills is doing the hiring on the next coach, I would bet a lot of money on whatever Mark Jackson's odds are on Bovada. That would be my guess of who they hire, because he's
and then who do you hire when Mark Jackson gets fired in a year and a half? The guys I want to ask you about, 3 specific guys. Okay. I always would hire like a young up and coming assistant. Of course, that's always like the smart move in my opinion, but they're the Knicks. They kind of like to make splashes sometimes. I like Jay Wright from Villanova. I think he would translate well to the NBA. John Beilein, whom you were super high on, has done a good job with Cleveland. Has Villanova peaked? Would Jay Wright feel like jumping to the Knicks now?
Doubt it. I think he's going to the Sixers, or he's not leaving Villanova. But I mean, maybe. I don't know. Like, why? What makes you think Jay Wright would be able to succeed? And then if Jay Wright comes up and he's like, this roster stinks, we lose all the time, what's to make Jay Wright stay?
Well, I always look, when you think about college coaches, I always look, you know, in the NFL, they're like, well, maybe we can get Nick Saban or Lincoln Riley. Like, no, those guys are going to win for the next 20 years. They're fine. I tend to think of Jay Wright. Obviously, he's winning a lot of games in his conference, but, you know, it's not a recruiting hotbed. He's won 2 titles. It feels very similar to Billy Donovan to me, where they're like, we sort of peaked, and it's hard to keep that level of success. So if he did want to jump, you know, East Coast guy, I think it would kind of make sense. I'm sure they would throw a lot of money at him if they had it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what makes necessarily Jay Wright so appealing anyway, because one of the things that he's so good at is building culture. Like, he was able to recruit at Villanova in the late 2000s, even early 2000s. And then the guys that they ended up winning the title with, like, yes, they had good players. And obviously Jalen Brunson the second time around was a McDonald's All-American. But, like, the guys that Jay Wright got at Villanova that really, truly flipped the program were, like, your Scotty Reynoldses, who were top 100 players, or Ryan Arcidiaconos, like your Chris Jenkinses, like those guys, Phil Booth, Josh Hart, like they weren't 5-star guys. Like, what he did was he flipped the culture of their program and how they did things. And they got really, really good fundamentally. And I don't know that Jay is the right guy to kind of do that in the NBA.
And let me give you 2 more names as far as big splashes go. A guy who's also in college making $9 million a year, tough to draw him in. Question his X and O's. John Calipari, and let me give you the pitch. The pitch is he's had so many NBA stars come through, and he tells you behind the scenes quietly, Tyler, P.S., I can bring you Karl Anthony Towns. I could bring you Anthony Davis, or somebody like that. Like, he's so tied in with these guys that he is the recruiting draw that they thought maybe Fizdale was going to be.
Yeah, I could see it. I don't think he'll do it. Obviously, New Jersey didn't go well the first time around. Kentucky, they basically just gave him a lifetime contract. So I don't know. I mean,
Fresh off the loss to where Evanstown or
just
Evansville.
lost to Evansville.
What about the Evansville coach? That was my no. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, not Walter McCarty. He's got a not Walter McCarty. But anyway,
what last name I want to mention to you is not a coach. Big name, potentially on the rocks with his current job. GM of the Stars made the spreadsheet sexy again. Daryl Morey. Do you think like he would ever jump ship from Houston now and take on a new challenge?
I don't think he's jumping ship from Houston. I think this is a good This is like a good transition point because so Eric Gordon's out for 4 to 6 weeks. James Harden's been tremendous. He is who he is. He's not shooting the ball well. He's averaging 37 points a game. Like Houston's 7-3 at the moment. So
yeah, they're 7-3. They're we mentioned their pace has jumped up without Chris Paul. I mean, they've gone from 26th fastest pace in the league back up to number 1. Offense is still top 3. I mean, they could score. James Harden can score pretty much in any pace, but
their defense is atrocious. And obviously their pace is high, so they give up a lot of points. But their defense is really, really bad. I mean, it's just not.
It feels like James Harden and like a bunch of Scotch tape, right? I mean, it's just like their depth is really weak right now.
It's wild too. Like one of the things I think about, we haven't talked about the Wizards a lot on this show the last 6 months because there hasn't really been a reason to. But they just cut Daniel House for nothing. He was like a two-way guy for them, and Daniel House has actually been one of the good signs for the Rockets this year. But yeah, I mean the Rockets, I could see Daryl Morey getting fired,
and I don't even know if it's performing. The China thing we kind of made light of, whatever. Not media made light of or whatever. People don't think it's a big deal. People have forgotten about it. But if Tillman, what's his last name?
Furtada,
yeah, that's funny. If he does some calculations behind the scenes and he talks to, he hears that China is willing to jump back in the business with the Rockets. I've read, I think it was recently, they said they lost about $5-10 million per year in sponsorships with China.
The Rockets or the NBA?
The Rockets specifically.
Okay, gotcha.
So is Daryl Morey worth that? Can he save face with them and claim that he's firing them because of that? I mean,
I think the interesting part about this whole Rockets kind of drama is that I always felt, I don't know if you said this or we talked about somebody saying this, but this Russell Westbrook thing, I liked it. I thought it was a smart move just because I didn't think they were going to break through with Chris Paul. And when you realize you've peaked at a certain point, you have to continually try to get better. So, but I heard a lot of people talk about this trade as if it was a panic move. It's, it is like General Custer is Daryl Morey's last stand, right? So if this doesn't work, I think there's a really good chance. And we could see this happen in the midseason. What if they, right now they've been a little bit lucky. They've outperformed their record a little bit, I think, because their civil rating system is they're 15th, right? 15th or 14th, even though they're 7-3. But you could see D'Antoni and Daryl Morey on the market. And why couldn't those guys go somewhere else as a package deal? Because they have worked really well together as a GM and coach. So I think that could happen. Do you not think so? D'Antoni might just say, fuck it. He doesn't want to coach anymore, right? He might just be forget it. I'll go to West Virginia and just play golf all day. But
it's just so hard. I think it's so hard for either of them to leave James Harden right now. I mean, you've talked about all the time, best scorer in the NBA. I mean, such an impactful player. I think as soon as he starts breaking down, they're going to start. I think Morey is smart enough to jump ship then. I think
you're talking jump ship like it's going to be his decision. We're talking about if he's going to get fired. Let's say they lose. If they lose in the first round of the playoffs this year, do you think that Daryl Morey and Mike D'Antoni are both going to be part of the Rockets?
I just don't see them losing. I mean, their roster right now is limited. They really need size on the wing and the 4. I just think those aren't impossible fixes. You can Scotch tape that. Eric Gordon's been playing so much small forward and he's hurt, and then you think, oh, now they don't have anyone. But he shouldn't be playing small forward. So they can't find anyone that can play that role. I like Daniel House too, and he's kind of small too.
What's your definition of a big wing?
A big wing.
Daniel House is a pretty. He's a
They
big
listed as
individual.
6'6".
Yeah, it's his true height, 6'6", 215. That's pretty good. I mean, I understand he's not guarding like Kawhi
Give me
and Paul George.
Kevin Durant. No, I think they're going to do well. I don't know. I have a feeling that they're going to make the second round. Maybe that's why I don't think they're going to panic and Morey can have this decision on his own.
Is that even good enough, do you think, the second round? I'm being serious. Like, you think the guy is a loose cannon, right? Like, Tillman, like, he's going to shake things up. But the problem is who's going to be better, because one of the things I've long thought about this Houston roster is, like, it's built perfectly for Mike D'Antoni and Daryl Morey. Like, it's their baby, right? So who are you going to bring in that's going to be able to execute this with the pieces they have? Because that Russell Westbrook contract could be a real freaking anchor pretty soon.
Well, no, totally. And you talk about the specifics of that, $38 million this year. It's matching with James Harden, basically. They're both 38, 41, 44, then 47.
How about this conspiracy? Did Daryl hire Russell Westbrook to burn the ships? Because they're like, you can't fire me because you can't get out of this mess. Did he attach Russell Westbrook as an anchor, like he's going down with the ship?
I mean, there is not much you can do. That's the danger of those like big max money. It's like the John Wall thing. Like, if you crash, you get hurt, or you just lose a step, 40 million is a pretty heavy anchor.
Yeah, it's real. And especially if the salary cap does go down because of the China stuff, which again, that's just wildly speculating at this point. But like the Rockets' ability to add in season, because I do think we agree.
Their salary cap, by the way, their payroll, 145, 145, 130, and then 130 in 2022.
What's the hard cap this year?
I don't know, actually, but everyone's payroll is really high this year, so I don't know what it is. It's not an appealing job, though. I mean, unless you just think that you could tinker.
It's an appealing job because you get paid a lot of money. But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't know, and I don't think that Daryl is the guy to fix the Knicks, but I do think that he will at least look at the roster in the right mindset. Like, I do struggle, again, with us not being able to know what goes on behind closed doors. And I think this in every sport, right? You don't know what, a baseball general manager tells his manager. You don't know what like a football general manager tells his coaches, although I do think football coaches probably have the most autonomy. But like, we don't know what the Knicks have said. And so like, my thing is, it was very clear they were trying to compete this year. Well, now that's not going to happen. So I think they need to hire a guy who's like, all right, look, we're a year or two away. Like, we have some appealing assets to go get some other stuff for us, but we're not going to compete. So I'm not going to load us up with stupid contracts. James Dolan, just take your money because you own the Knicks. You're going to make a lot of money this year, and then we'll try to compete 2 years down the road or something, Because like, this isn't even an appealing team to tank with.
No. I mean, it's like the worst of both worlds, where like the young talent's not that good, and then the current talent's not that good.
Right, like RJ and Mitchell Robinson, like, and even maybe Kevin Knox, like, okay, like that's an okay three to build around. But like, if they're your best three players in 4 years, that team's not winning a title. Is that a playoff team with those being your best three players?
My fear for the Knicks is like, they're clearly not good enough, but are they bad enough? Like, because there are legitimate veterans on this team. So are you going to sink behind? I think Memphis is, going to sink behind them. I still think Charlotte. And
do you think that about Memphis and Charlotte? I mean, they're playing hard.
I think so. I think eventually they're just going to sink. I don't know about Cleveland. Cleveland at 4-6. I mean, they really have shocked me.
Why don't you let's talk about some of those teams, because we talked about some teams that have kind of outperformed what we thought, with like Minnesota in the past.
Well, let me give you some candidates. You tell me which team you think is the most real and the most surprising.
Why don't you tell me about people that have just before we get into the teams, how about stuff that's outpaced your expectations? How about this new Wrangler stuff that we got?
That's a good transition, because Wrangler, they make cool jeans for guys who want to look and feel good. And to that end, like, the proof is in the pudding. Wrangler actually sent each of us a box of stuff, and they really kind of blew our expectations out of the water. It's sort of like the Phoenix Suns of jean companies, right? Like, they have all these great new styles that you didn't expect. I think of Wrangler, I think of jeans, but they have all sorts of styles and different kinds of outerwear. What do you have, like a personal favorite? Like, because I told you I've been wearing like the button-down shirt today. It's one of the most comfortable shirts I've ever owned, actually.
Yeah, they also sent us like a performance vest that's really good. It's gotten pretty cold here in Nashville. It got down to like 17 degrees. You don't know about that in the beautiful weather of LA, but it was like a big kind of like a heavier vest that goes with just almost any type of clothing you wear. So I've been wearing the vest a lot.
Yeah, and I was really that's the kind of thing I didn't know and I didn't realize, because you think about Wrangler, you think of jeans. They have all that. They have the straight leg, slim fit, tapered, premium washes, all the jeans you want. I mean, you could load up on jeans, but the shirts it's probably my favorite shirt that I own in terms of like just totally comfortable, looks good. It's versatile. I can wear it to a meeting. I can wear it at home. I could wear it during a podcast. So I really appreciate it. And so if proof is in the pudding, as I said, so go to wrangler.com/underdog MBA to see if I'm lying or not. I'm not. I promise you. I'll give you your money back if I'm wrong. I promise you this is good stuff. Wrangler, wear with abandon. Wrangler.com/underdog MBA.
So what did you have? You had a couple teams that we wanted to talk about that have, we can do underperformed and overperformed too, because it kind of just dives into it. I just do want to throw out one piece of news. Karis LeVert going to see a specialist for ligaments in his hand. Brooklyn's currently 4-6, but they do have a roster exemption because of the Wilson Chandler suspension. So they have signed Iman Shumpert off the streets. We figured he would join a team. I did think Houston was an option, but obviously they lowballed him a little bit. So he is going to occupy that 16th roster spot for now for Brooklyn. But I think Brooklyn is obviously in the line of teams that have been a little bit disappointing, and they've obviously had some injury concerns, and they have not been at full strength. But bringing in Iman Shumpert to help them on the defensive side of the ball, does that move the needle for you, Zandrick?
Well, 26th in defense now. It'll probably help there. I don't know. I agree. It has been one of the most disappointing teams. And it's like sort of like the Kyrie Irving effect. Like, how good is he going to be? And meanwhile, you look across the river or whatever, and Boston's 8-1 and second in offensive rating and seventh in defense. And they just look like they are enjoying themselves a little bit more too. I still believe in Kyrie Irving. I just don't know if this team believes in themselves right now. You've mentioned to me, DeAndre Jordan doesn't look like he's awake yet. It's sort of just like, let's let Kyrie score 35 and we'll go home 500. I mean, like, I don't see a sense of urgency here. I don't really see a team that's really anything ticketed for anything other than the first round exit if they make it.
And we should say that, like, there is obviously potential to turn stuff around very quickly. They're 4-6, but in Indiana we talked about being a disappointment, and they're 7-4 now. So I mean, again, like, you can turn it around quickly. The problem with Brooklyn is that you're right. Like, they look like they can't get stops on defense. They've been so much better with Jared Allen, but they do obviously play DeAndre Jordan. Kyrie's been spectacular, but again, and I hate to say things like this because we don't know. Like, we have no idea behind the scenes. Jackie McMullen, it felt like, wrote kind of a hit piece about Kyrie where they were like, oh, we can't handle his mood swings. Like, he's moody. And then, but it does feel like Kyrie goes places and there's just a malaise, if that is a good word to use.
Well, the McMullen thing was weird because it wasn't like he was moody. It was just like he was quiet, right?
Yeah,
it was like, and by the way, I would love coworkers who are quiet and leave me alone. I don't see it as like a real problem, but he is become an easy punching bag almost.
Yeah, and it's probably not fair to him, but it does look like Kemba, I guess if they played one-on-one, you would take Kyrie Irving, but there is a credible argument that Kemba is a better NBA basketball player than Kyrie.
So that's a good question. So if Kemba was on Brooklyn, you think they would be like, let's say this is a 500 team.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you think they'd be much different? I don't know.
That's a really good question. I mean, because Boston is definitely more talented than Brooklyn is right now, given.
Yeah, and I think almost part of it, I would defend Kyrie in this regard. I think a lot of people are saying, oh, Kyrie's gone. And I just kind of alluded to it. The team feels better. They look better playing, more unselfishly, I guess. But I think a lot of it comes down to the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, like, growing up, like they're 21, 23. I mean, they're going to get better. Specifically, Brown's had a good year. I mean, like, they were probably going to be this, improve with Kyrie too.
But it felt like, it felt like the Boston, and again, this is a lot of like Bill Simmons speak and like Zach Lowe and Ryan Russillo, and like, we know how those guys feel about Kyrie, and every single time they talk about Kyrie, they always qualify it with like, he's super fun to watch. It's great on offense. And then they just like destroy him behind the scenes, and they're like, we've heard all these things. And, it does feel a little bit like Boston was like, you know what? We don't want to pay you as much money as we're going to have to, and have you kind of have our young guys grow up around you, if that makes sense. And I don't know that was a decision. If Kyrie had said to Danny Ainge, like, hey, I want to take a max extension, I cannot prove that Danny Ainge would be like, no, I'm not doing that.
Well, do you think it's personality or play style? Because Kyrie will get assists. He'll get 6 or 7 assists a game, but it's not the sort of in the flow of the offense assists. It's more like, let me have the ball and then I know who's going to shoot to get an assist for myself. Almost,
yeah, I don't know. That's like the Rondo thing, though, for years in Boston. And even now in LA, everyone's like, Rondo, he's so good. Like, he's so spectacular. And for a while in Boston, he was just like hurting them on offense because that was what he was doing. He was like assist hunting. And it's like a weird situation with Kyrie. I do think his attitude is that's been the rumblings from Boston, is that like he really kind of destroyed that team from the inside out last year. But again, we're not there every day. We don't know. It's very easy to just like ether a guy on the way out the door. But like, I doubt Brooklyn is a lot better with Kemba instead of Kyrie. And I doubt that Boston is like a ton worse with Kyrie. They might be a little bit worse for sure.
Yeah, they're similar players. And I think for Boston, that's a win, even if you say it's even, because, and they haven't, terribly missed Al Horford. I mean, I know they have front court issues. I mean, maybe they have, and Aaron Baines has played really well without, Phoenix as part of their resurgence. I don't know. Do you think Boston, this is I guess the $64,000 question, are they an actual threat to make the finals?
Yeah, it's really good. I think based on what we've seen so far, here's what I'll say about the East. Milwaukee has, again, in my opinion, been the best team in the East through the first 10 games. The Sixers are very, very good. Boston is very good. I worry about the Sixers shooting, same deal as before, but I do think the Sixers have probably been the 4th or 5th best team despite their 7-3 record. Miami's been really good. I don't know that Boston can beat Milwaukee if they face each other in the finals, but I do think they have the most interesting collection of wings to kind of throw at Giannis. So I would say from what we've seen so far, I think Boston is definitely a legitimate threat to win the East. And again, that's Romeo Langford. It's another, wing.
Romeo Langford.
Big game in Maine the other day, 27 points. Like, I'm just saying, like, Boston does have a very interesting group of guys.
Well, let me give you this question then as a hypothetical, because if you look at Bovada and you want to bet these things, Milwaukee advanced stats, love them again. I mean, the better than their record. They're number 1 in advanced ratings, SRS, number 1 in the NBA. A little bit behind are teams like Boston, Miami, Toronto, Philadelphia, a little lower. Indiana's in the mix, I guess. Like, if I gave you to make the finals, Milwaukee or the field?
I'd take the field.
You take the field? You think it's that? Yeah, I guess. I mean, I would take Milwaukee in any individual series, but, it is hard. It's a fun year, actually, because you really can't. I could give you 3 NBA teams, and I'd probably take the field over the top 3 picks to win the title.
Let's talk about Milwaukee for a second, because I've said this before. Like, obviously, Chris Middleton is now injured, so we're gonna see them for 3 to 4 weeks without him. But I mean, Giannis. I don't know what to say about the guy, man. Like, he is so freaking good. He's getting to the point. You remember when when LeBron kind of really peaked, and it was like, okay, we just get 28, 8 and 8 every single night, and it's like you just don't even register, right?
Right now, it's 30, 14, and 7.
I mean, it's ridiculous the way that and like 3 stocks a game, like 1.5 blocks and like basically 1.5 steals. It's insane how good this guy is, and I don't know what It's just so funny to think like. If we saw, okay, let me pick a guy out. Who's like a good young wing in the NBA? All right, if Jason Tatum threw up 30, 15, and 7 in a game, would it not be the lead on SportsCenter?
I don't know about that, but I know your point. I mean, it would be like a huge day. Yeah, and that kind of, I feel like all the stats now are just so out of whack. It's so.
Oh, you've been waiting. You're so excited to make this point, but it's just. I'm just saying. I just want to throw this out here about Milwaukee.
It's good. We get it.
I am very impressed with how they've handled the loss of Malcolm Brogdon, because he very clearly is an awesome NBA player. Like, and I think they're going to regret paying Bledsoe come playoff time. And maybe there's an argument to let Middleton walk and keep Brogdon. I don't know. I don't want to.
No, I think in hindsight's 2020. But Brogdon instead of Bledsoe, you'd pick this team to win the title, right?
Man, I think they would be right there. I still think, Paul George is going to be back Thursday night. I still think the Clippers are the odds-on favorite, and the Lakers have been awesome. I mean, those two teams, in terms of like expectations, I would say they've even blown up my expectations. You know, we've talked about teams that have overperformed. I think the Lakers have overperformed as well. But Milwaukee, it's just I'm just stunned by how good Giannis is already. And I know he won MVP last year, so it's so crazy to say that, but it just feels like we're watching a guy who, you know, I think we both ranked him like 6th or 7th as the seventh best player in the NBA. And I was very adamant that Harden was better. And in terms of watching those two guys this year, I mean, I'd rather have Giannis, even with what James Harden's doing. It's amazing to me what Giannis's like baseline for a game is right now.
Yeah, but that's what I was talking about. What you refer to as like my grumpy old man take. I don't, as many points as they're scoring and as gaudy as the stat lines are, like I don't really enjoy opening up the paper. I don't do that anymore. Talk about a real old man getting the paper, shuffling out, getting my Sunday paper, opening the box score, reading Family Circus, and then seeing that, Luka Doncic 40 and 20, and Giannis 50 and 20. It's just like it seems too easy to score now. And you look at the numbers and it's not like it's cyclical in this sense. Like I'm looking at the basketballreference.com in the early 80s, it was similar. It was scoring about 110 points a game with a similar pace to now.
But obviously more field goal attempts back then because they didn't shoot as many threes. But yeah.
Right. The efficiency is much better now. And I guess that's the point. And I grew up in the 90s when basketball was ugliest, I guess you would say, with like the slowest pace and teams were scoring, in the mid 90s a game. But it felt like, here's my problem with it. At least then it felt like scoring was a feat, like it felt like you did something good. It wasn't expected that you would hit a shot. And you'd hit about half the shots or whatever. But like, I kind of dawned on me, I was watching, we were watching something else on TV. I don't have control of the remote totally.
This Is Us, probably. A nice yeah. Family, wholesome show.
But they have all these like advanced stats now, and they have like expected win percentage, I guess. I don't know what the exact stat is. Game, minute by minute and shot by shot. I forgot the teams. Let's just say it was Houston and Utah, for example. And Houston was down by 1, with like a minute or 2 left. And they had the ball. And Houston was expected win percentage, whatever it was on ESPN, 52%. And then they made a 2-pointer, take the lead. Their expected win percentage went down to 48% because the other team had the ball now, and you're expected to score, according to stats, more than 1 point per possession, and blah, blah. And it went back and forth like that for a while, where then Utah had the ball, down 1, they make a shot, their expected win total goes down. And it's just like, that doesn't feel right to me. It shouldn't feel that like it's that easy to score, that it's expected to score, literally expected by this like advanced stat algorithm.
I mean, the average points per game in the NBA this year, I think so far it's like 110 and a half, like 110.4. And it's funny, there's only 2 teams averaging less than 100 points. And one of those teams is the Knicks. They're averaging 99 and a half, not surprising. And then the other team is Orlando, and they're averaging 98 points. And that's one of the reasons why they've been so bad. But I don't know. I'm not gonna. I might title this episode like "Grumpier Old Men" or something, because like basketball is like a very aesthetically pleasing game, and I totally understand. Like, it's very fun, I think, when you witness like a change in the fabric of something, but it also kind of, I don't know. It's like
I feel that about college football too. I'd rather watch I don't like watching the Big 12 when it's 50 to 40. I don't. I think like...
All right, hold on. That's the most blasphemous statement of all time. Like, would you have rather watched... Okay, this is a perfect example. LSU, Alabama on Saturday, right? 46 to 40, super fun game. Guys are making crazy plays, 25 pros on the field or whatever. Game of the century, 2011, the game was like 9-0. When they were 1 and 2 again.
Well, there was one game that was like 6 to 3 or something. Honestly,
right, but I'm saying, was that game better? No way. Yes, this game was so much more fun than that. I'm not arguing with you. Is it better played? I'm just arguing.
No, I'm saying it's more fun to watch. It's like,
what? Are you serious? You want to watch 10 punts a game? You're.
No, let me give you an example. Speaking of network TV, do you ever watch like America Ninja Warrior?
I mean, I've seen it. Yes.
Okay, I barely watch it, but you know what I'm talking about. Or whatever, any of those like Wipeout type shows where they run an obstacle course and they try to do it. if 90% of the people who did it won the obstacle course, it would be very hard to watch that show. It'd be so boring. Everyone does what is expected. You need like 1 out of 10 people to do it, and then it feels like a feat. Or if you're watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, like the first guy who won that, what a big deal. If 80% of the people won it, I wouldn't watch the show. And I feel like the expected scoring it's so expected. And it's become like in the NFL too, like, hey, you have to plan so much. Like, you're not going to stop Russell Wilson from getting a field goal here. It's so easy to score. I don't like it. I think there's a compromise, of course, between like the 3-0 game and the 40-30 game or whatever. But I think in the NBA is one as well. Like, I don't like watching the 110 to 130 to 120 games.
It's like very odd to watch a team like the Wizards, who are very bad, be like 9th in the NBA in scoring, because it's like they're just not a very talented team and they can't defend, but everybody can score. I understand that. I don't think it's
and I'm not like grumpy old man in the sense that like defense was so much better back in my day. Like, defensive efforts there, they're just. I guess my problem also too is just like teams are smarter now. Front offices are smarter now. They're exploiting sort of, I think, flaws in the game. I think, the 3-point shot is too valuable. I think free throws are too valuable. Mostly the 3-point shot, because free throws are not actually that up. It's the threes that are the difference.
It's interesting, right? Because we've seen college basketball adapt over the last couple of years. They moved the line back once, and then they moved it back again. So, I don't know that the NBA will do something like that, because again, you don't want to necessarily change the fabric of the game, if you will. But the 3-point line was a relatively late add anyway in terms of modern basketball.
3 points has doubled in the last 10 years. I mean, that's such a seismic shift that the league hasn't caught up.
I got a question for you. Would you rather add a 4-point line or move the 3-point line like 2 feet back?
Whenever I suggest this, I get like eye rolls, but I would like to expand the court and move the 3-point line back so it's even. Like, I just don't understand why the
corner threes are shorter.
Easier. Yeah, and I've been told that's really hard to do, and blah blah blah.
Well, you're not going to expand the court.
Yeah, well, that's the part that. But I would get rid of the corner 3 maybe, or something. I just think.
Yeah, like maybe that shot's worth 2, and above the break threes are worth 3. It'd be quite interesting to see how that would happen. I don't think that'll ever happen. It's the same thing like where everyone says
in terms of the 4-point shot, I would say this. I would say a half court shot should be 4. Why not? I just think it would make it more fun at end of game scenario, like a Hail Mary at the end of the game.
I do think that the one thing that people forget about, and this is one hilarious argument in baseball, and like people talk about this all the time, that like shifting and the juiced ball and all that stuff is like ruining the fan experience, because it's either a home run or it's a strikeout or it's just an out, right? Whatever. But with basketball, like there are some interesting things that you could do to make the game harder to like think around, if you will. Like, because if you moved it back and you had a 4-point line, like guys would try to exploit that, right? That's just what smart people do, and that's what you want. You want smart people to play the game as perfectly as it's supposed to be played. But nobody's going to solve basketball.
The game should be math proof, like it should be fair, and it's like it's sort of this idea that like that's the way it is, the 3-point line, because that's the way it is. Like, not really. It was a few decades old, and it's not like these games that came from like the mountaintop, like some random dude invented it and there's flaws in the game, just the same as like if I invented a game, you might be able to poke a few holes in it.
And I definitely think that your argument, and that was kind of my point, was that like basketball, you can change it to make the game better. Now, I don't want to do something like insane, like, oh, now it's 4-on-4, like, or now it's 6-on-6, like let's get another defender out there. Like, I don't want to do anything crazy like that. But yeah, I think it's worth looking at, like, maybe with the way pace is now, like maybe the shot clock should be less.
When I was a kid, I used to play basketball with dice, toys and dice.
It's very nerdy. I would expect that.
But as a kid, I mean about a week ago. And one of the rules, it was very simple, rudimentary. You have one die, really. And if you're shooting a 2, you had to get a 4, 5, or 6 to make it. If you're shooting a 3, you had to get a 5 or 6 to make it. And you'd say, wow, well, I didn't think about it at the time, expected point percentage and points per possession, but I'm like, that's even. You get 3 points for a shot, you make a third of the time. You get 2 points for a shot, you make half the time.
Right. And that's not what this is anymore.
Right. Like that's what basketball should be. And I think they need to tweak it until they, line up with my perfect vision of Dice basketball.
Unfortunately, I highly doubt that any of these things are going to come. And we got so far off track. We were going to talk about how great John Beilein is, and instead you got on your soapbox about how the NBA was better in 1954 when it was like George Mikan against a bunch of like.
I don't think it's better. I think it's better now. It's sort of like it's been solved, though. It's like one of those things where it's like the extra point kickers are better now. Let's make it harder.
It's a very. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I don't agree that basketball has been solved. I think it's a very free flowing game, and but I do think the rise of a guy like, and again, like it always comes back to this, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to think about like if Jordan or Kobe like actually played in this specific era.
Right. Well, that's what I hate. That's another thing I hate about it too. Cranky old man. But like I'm going to hear I swear, I know I'm going to hear it in the next couple of months. Luka Doncic is better than Larry Bird because look at his points per possession and his true shooting. And it's like, and Larry Bird's maybe a bad example, but Kobe's a good one. And Allen Iverson is like, these guys were not taught true shooting percentage.
Right. My point on that wasn't necessarily that. My point was like when you get a guy like LeBron, you can play differently. Right. So like, I'm not going to say that they invented small ball because they certainly didn't, like 7 seconds or less with Phoenix in 2007. Like they played around Amari Stoudemire, they had Steve Nash, and obviously the Orlando Magic played 4 around Dwight Howard when they had to in the playoffs, and Turkoglu was their point guard for a while. But like, really teams started to watch like, okay, if we have a bigger wing who can handle the ball, like teams have been doing for years, right? Like Jordan did it, Kobe did it, like teams did that stuff. But they were like, this actually makes us much more valuable on the offensive side of the ball. So you're able to do more things. And that's why I don't think this is solved yet, because I think guys are going to find better ways to like employ certain players. But yeah, when you get guys who are like bigger and more skilled, like it's just, this is the nature of the game, right? Like this is a natural evolution of basketball, is it not?
No, it's true. But like, I think you have to, bounce back against it. Like, they're not even actually shooting that much better from three. It's about the same. Yeah. It's just like they're shooting more.
Part of that though is think about this, right? So Reggie Miller, like he was allowed to take as many threes as he wants. I'm sure like within rhythm, but like, or within reason, excuse me. But like, if James Harden proved himself to be a 34% 3-point shooter in 1993, I guarantee you he wasn't shooting even 8 threes a game.
No, and it shows you. Like, and again, like just to reiterate, like I think it's smart. Like these are definitely smart, and that's why I think sports in general, whether it's football or baseball or basketball, are so slow to change. Is because there's so much of that. Like that's the way we do it, Like, and then the old days, like the coaches used to be former players who have been, operating like the unwritten rules of this is how we play for the last 80 years. And I do think it took like the internet and, advanced stats and to finally break the mold. And baseball really gets all the credit for it. Being like, look, guys, like you're doing this improperly. Like you're not like you're a bunch of dummies, really. And like we've solved your game for you.
And baseball, baseball is at I think a little bit more of a crossroads because they really are. It's not like totally solved, but
no, but like, isn't it true? Like I stopped following baseball that much, but like the GMs and like the statisticians basically tell the managers what to do.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like a total. Most teams, I would say, like their lineups and like they're probably not calling down in-game decisions as much as you think. They may be doing it a little bit.
I heard the Dodgers did that, and I'll tell you, John Harbaugh, who's done well for the Ravens, they said in terms of game management, he's gone with the advanced stats every single time this year for Baltimore. And I don't look at that and say he's making the wrong decision. That's absolutely the right decision backed up by math. I mean, it's not like I'm not against it, but it changes the game.
It's like really funny. And I don't know, I don't remember if we had this discussion or not. And I still was trying to find the math on this, but with San Francisco and Seattle, and like we're like way off topic. So let's just lean into it. Like San Francisco and Seattle on Monday night, right? Because of San Francisco having a 2-game lead in the division, there was like this argument that they should not have tried to win the game when they got the ball back with like 1:55 to go in overtime, and they should have just run the ball. And it's like, look, if you gain a ton on the first run, okay, like run your offense. But if not, just kneel, take the tie, because then your probability of winning the division is much higher than if you lose. And it's like that type of thinking just doesn't really exist in the NFL, right? Because that's probably the league that's the most further along in terms of analytics, or the not as far along.
It's just the hardest too, because there's more players and you don't really understand it necessarily. And even the advanced stats for football, I think, are the worst for that reason. It's not like they're dumb, or it's just like it's hard to understand.
Let me give you a crazy stat, okay? of the top 9 3-point shooters based on attempts in the NBA currently, 4 of the 9 guys are not shooting 35% from 3. In terms of, I mean, that's the difference in like why you're saying, hey, the shooting is actually the same. It's just that the distribution in terms of shooters is much different. And I mean,
and that's what I bump again. Like I love James. I don't love James Harden. I hate James Harden as a player, but he's exceptionally effective. And it just bugs me, like bothers my brain. And we've seen it like multiple times this season where he shoots like 3 for 20 and actually had a good game shooting the ball just because it like.
And it doesn't feel like that should be possible, right? And that's the part of this that's crazy. It's like, how is James Harden so effective? And now we're seeing it. And again, this is like we've talked about this Luka Trae Young thing a lot, but this is why Luka made more sense for Dallas, because this is the type of guy they wanted. Like Luka is going to play the James Harden role, but he's going to be bigger. He's probably not going to be quite as good at it because James Harden is 30 and Luka's 20. Who knows what Luka's going to be in 10 years? But we're already watching this kid at 20 years old, you know, be this huge, like ball dominant, like get to the free throw line, take a ton of threes, like have this massive volume. That's what Dallas wanted. It's harder to do that with a guy like Trae Young. And that's where you start to see the analytical side of this go in. It's like, hey, we want a guy that can take an unbelievable like minutes load and usage load and build around that guy. And that's going to be how we play our team out. And I don't know that you would have seen that, you know, even 5 years.
I mean, Luka, I mean, maybe buried the lead. I mean, everyone's been harping on it. 28, 10, and 9. You know, he's amazing. He's 20 years old.
Him and Trae Young are both ridiculous. Like I mean, because they're always going to be linked because they were traded for each other.
But I just hate like looking at these numbers with a grain of salt, just being like, and even he had said it's easier than he expected to score in the NBA. And I don't know if you saw Nick Stauskas is in Europe right now saying it's much harder to score there. He's not exactly, he wasn't lighting up the NBA, but you know, it's just, I don't want the NBA to be easy to score in. I think that's my grumpy old man take.
I mean, Luka, like the thing with Luka is he's shooting like 50% he's shooting like 62% from 2, you know, like he's still shooting, like he's shooting 32% from 3, but he's still shooting like almost 50% from the field on a ridiculous number of field goal attempts. I don't know that he's in the top 5 in field goal attempts.
Well, we might not have time to get into it, but we talked about he's played like a top, 5 player this year, top 10 player.
I would say the two. If you ask me to say like who's been the most surprising to you in terms of what they've been able to do this year, Damian Lillard's been spectacular, right? Like Portland's had some bad luck, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Dame because he's been so damn good. But I would say that Siakam, Luka, Andrew Wiggins, and Trae Young, like those 4 guys, like I had no idea that there was another level. And Wiggins, I told you, I don't want to get into because we've seen kind of flashes from them before. But the other 3 guys like Luka, Trae Young, and Pascal Siakam, like it's been wild how good those guys have been and how good their teams have been because of them. Like obviously Atlanta's 4-6, but Trae missed some games. But like those 3 dudes have been like easily top 15 players, right? And would you have had any of those guys in your top 15 if we ranked them before the season? Would you have had any of those guys in like the top 25 maybe?
And and it's legitimate. I mean, like, you know, the numbers are, you know, it's 10 games feels like, small sample size, whatever. It's a sizable part of the season. I'm just want to see how it ends up. Like, I mean, could these guys be top, you know, all NBA first team, second team?
I mean, I think if the season ended today, Luka would be an all-NBA first-team guy. The other guy probably that deserves a lot of credit, and they're trying to figure it out, but Donovan Mitchell's been really, really good this year as well.
But hasn't everyone been good? That's my problem. It's like, it feels like, it's like we talked about Madden last week and how I would try to challenge myself and keep the stats low, and it feels like we're all playing Madden on easy mode.
All right, I'll give you this. James Harden, let me ask you this. If there was a problem with Bovada, and we could actually maybe talk to them about doing this, but if there was a problem with Bovada and you could have Harden or Giannis, or I'll give you one more. You can have Harden, Giannis, or one more guy of your choice. You can have Harden, Giannis, or LeBron for MVP. Would you take that or would you take the field?
Harden, LeBron, Giannis. Well, I don't think LeBron. I mean, I think he's going to get a little media narrative, and he's
been pretty awesome, to be honest, and he's been pretty good.
And he's sort of like, you know, you talk about like the primary and the presidential primary, like what lane are you running on, and are you moderate or you're extreme? You know, LeBron's running on I'm a playmaker. I'm going to average 10 assists a game, and like I'm the guy who helped Anthony Davis become a winner. That's the right lane to run on a campaign on.
You know, LeBron's first in the NBA in total assists, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he would try to do that. It makes sense.
Yeah, that's like his thing. LeBron's a very calculated dude. But yeah, LeBron, Malcolm Brogdon, Doncic, Harden, and then my guy Ricky Rubio are top 5 in total assists. Trae Young will probably end up leading the NBA in assists.
I think it's hard. It's going to be hard. I would pick those 3 just because I think it's going to be hard to beat Giannis this year or Harden. I think less so LeBron. Like, the whole like voter fatigue thing is a little overblown. There have been multiple winners. It happens about a third of the time in the last decade or last 20 years. So I think Giannis, if he's the number 1 seed and he's putting up 28 and 12, I mean, how do you vote against him? Yeah.
Especially because people really like Giannis. Whereas like Harden, I'm not going to get into like bias or whatever, but like I'm clearly biased for James Harden, but I think there's a large collection of people that don't want James Harden to be the representative of what the NBA is just because of kind of how he plays the game and kind of like what Houston is. And then LeBron is LeBron. So I would say that the media the only guy I could really see like coming out of left field, like Kawhi's been good. Like he's been
I think that
good.
The media, like the narrative, like the load management has hurt.
It's hurt him. It's definitely hurt him in terms of if he's the best player in the NBA. Like guys are so willing to say like, oh, he's the best player, but he only plays 60 games, so he's not the most valuable, whatever. But the media, it feels like national writers. I don't follow a ton of local guys on Twitter. I do follow enough to know what's going on, especially for injuries and stuff. But the media, like they want Luka Doncic to be amazing, right? So if he was to average 28, 10, and 8, and Dallas wins 48 games, he could maybe win MVP.
He'll get votes. And I looked up LeBron, I think got some votes in his second year or third year. And it's possible. I think the fact that more and more writers are like savvy with advanced stats, I think is going to help Harden. I think
but it hasn't helped him the last couple of years.
But it's helped him more than it did. What was it, 4 or 5 years ago when they kind of got left off the ballot?
Yeah, he was like the 4th best. He was like analytically speaking, he was probably like the 3rd or 4th best player in the NBA, and he was like not even an All NBA 3rd team guy, which was like insane at the time because people were like mad at him. They were like, he doesn't try. But I mean, I don't know. Where do you stand on where Luka is right now in your personal rankings? Has he bumped a guy like Embiid or Jokic or somebody? I don't know that.
Probably, right? I mean, I always hate on Embiid's durability. Jokic, quietly they're 7-3. Everyone's hating on him.
Yeah, he hasn't been great. When he starts to make jump shots, his numbers should jump drastically.
Certainly for their career, you would take Doncic right now for the next 10 years. For this season, would you take Jokic or Doncic?
Yeah, I would take Jokic for sure. I think like one of the things, they both might have similar conditioning issues, although they both just play a lot of minutes anyway, so it just doesn't matter. It's kind of funny, like the few guys, other than like LeBron, who's just a cyborg, the few guys who seem to be able to just play tons and tons of minutes, it's like Harden, Doncic can definitely do it. Jokic plays a lot of minutes. Like they're not in shape dudes. Like, they're in shape, obviously.
Actually,
but they're not
I don't know if we have enough time to get into it. Like Doncic, I do worry about him wearing down over the course of his
season. He's never played, especially if they're going to be in a playoff hunt and he's going to have to play a lot of minutes. Now, I do think Dallas will be very smart with how they deploy him. We talk about load management for guys. Anthony Davis is sitting against Golden State on Thursday night. They already announced it. Like, that's a smart time to sit him. They said he has rib pain, but realistically, it's like we're not going to play him against Golden State. But
well, can I give you one stat that's because I've fully embraced stats? Luka last year, he played the short seasons in Europe and came over to the NBA and was rumored to be a little out of shape before the All-Star break, which is a sizable portion of the year. It's more before than after. But he shot 35% before the All-Star break. After the All-Star break, 26% from 3. And he's not shooting super well from 3 already. Now, I could see him like eventually like getting a little worn down. I hope they rest him and, but maybe they can't afford to. I don't know.
I think that's going to be the interesting thing because Porzingis hasn't been great, right? Like they've struggled to integrate Porzingis and Luka together. Like Luka's been really good, but he's been worse with Porzingis on the floor, and most of their players have been worse with Porzingis on the floor. So I do think part of it's that he hasn't played in a long time. I think he's probably a little rusty. He's probably not in great game shape. But Dallas, you're right. If they're in the playoff spot, because like it looks like a team like San Antonio is going to struggle this year, which is kind of interesting as well. And maybe we'll talk about them next week because they could trade Aldridge or DeRozan, both guys with 2 years left on their deal and maybe just try to build around their young guard core and see what's from it. Or maybe they want to run it back. I don't know. But Dallas looks like
next week. Let's like earmark some teams that don't get a lot of, everyone talks about the Knicks, but no one's really talking about the Spurs. No one's really talking about Chicago or Orlando, teams that are expected to make the playoffs, but haven't really been performing so far.
Right. And I do think as well, like Cleveland, you're exactly right. Like they've definitely looked friskier than people thought. They were quite good last night quite good on Tuesday night against the Sixers. Kevin Love missed a shot at the buzzer, but they played a game in the high 90s, and Tobias Harris makes $200 million and missed his first 10 threes last night. Not a great contract, but nobody talks about that.
He's the new JJ Redick. No, I saw the quote. Brett Brown said he's like their new JJ Redick.
But also like Charlotte, they've turned, like, it's obviously early. These teams are just 4-6, but I mean, I thought Charlotte was going to win like 11 games, And Cleveland, I do think there's still a big cliff they could fall off because I think they could trade guys. But yeah, we should talk about some teams like that next week because there are some very interesting decisions to make that are coming up in the future.
Well, that's an exciting tease, talking about teams that no one wants to talk about. But the big, stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, what's the big takeaway?
Well, you don't like basketball anymore and you host a basketball podcast. That's the big takeaway.
That's true. But I think the bigger takeaway is if you don't want to be like me, if you want to be hip, you want to be cool, you want to look good, you want to feel good, Wrangler.com/underdog NBA. I'm going to have to put on my Wranglers just to feel a little better about myself now after I ranted against the NBA for so long.
Also, some really good lines on Bovada for title odds. If you want to get into that, we are getting close to where I think you can draw some conclusions. Like I said, the Clippers, it'll be very interesting to see how they integrate Paul George. And we will talk about that next week, but Lakers look every bit as good as advertised. Utah looks very, very good. And Milwaukee looks really good as well. I think that it's going to be a fun season for sure.
Can you wear your Wrangler vest next week? I want to see how that looks.
All right.
Wrangler.com/underdog NBA.
Follow us on Twitter. I'm at CYS Tyler. He is at Zan_Ellison. My other shows, Create Your Shot. We've moved the show to Fridays for the time being, just during the college basketball season, so we can kind of talk about things that go on during the week. You can email the show, xandrickellison@gmail.com. Send Zan messages about how the NBA is better. And Zan we'll be back next week. And as always, it's a pleasure.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Underdog Sports NBA Show with your hosts, Tyler Laurie and Zandrick Ellison. Tune in next week for more NBA storylines and news.